Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Schifrin, and I am the chairman of the Planning Board, calling this meeting to order on November 16th at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to have a roll call vote, please, of the members.
Carol Hoffs is present.
Robert Therian present.
And Laura Schifrin present. Next, we'd like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That I have my Patriot shirt on too. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our veterans and those that are serving our country. We are grateful. This meeting is being recorded. 1.4 Chairman's additions, deletions to the agenda unforeseen prior to 48 hours of this meeting. I have none. So we are a little early for the 6:45 public hearing. If you are all willing, I'd like to go over and discuss. I'll have Beth put up the changes, which are supposed to be highlighted. Yes.
Which one would you like to take first, Madam Chair? There's two, so. The age-restricted development or site plan review special permit?
What I see first in my packet is the age restricted, I think.
Okay. So what, if I can just, this is what the warrant article will look like.
Okay.
You've seen it before. This is the version 2 that was done after your last public hearing.
Yeah.
And so the board knows the reason that we had to repost tonight was because there was a substantive change to the applicability section, which is the minimum lot size was changed to 1 acre. So that is the red line version, which everybody can see a little more clearly what got changed. Under section B, applicability, 2 was changed to 1 or more acres of land in terms of requirements. So that is why it had to be reposted tonight for more discussion.
Okay.
And then this was also changed down at number 8. Basically, it was the waiver discussion that you had after the last meeting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And I think that Adam did a great job with the verbiage of what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
On number 8. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I personally, I think some of us, but I'll say personally, I think that everything still boils down to being able to get a septic design approved by the Board of Health. So that could happen on a half-acre lot, so I think that gives the opportunity, number 8, gives the opportunity for the planning board to look at things in depth, and if in fact they're getting a permit for a septic system, it may warrant the waiver.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have anything to say, Carol or Robert?
I agree with you, Laura.
Well, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Carol, are we good?
Good, except I thought there was some discussion about the height of the buildings.
Yes, there was.
Were we going to change that to whatever the town height is?
I remember that, and unfortunately, that wasn't really voted on specifically.
Okay.
But I did talk to the building commissioner about that, and the town, what is in the zoning bylaw now is going to preside over this, as far as I understand it. That's the explanation I heard. It wasn't a change that had to be made because it's inconsistent.
Well, that's what I thought from our last meeting, that it was inconsistent with the thing, and that I thought it should be consistent with whatever the bylaw is.
Yeah, it's lower than,
Yeah.
what's in the zoning bylaw now. But yeah, I did ask the building commissioner about that. I mean, I certainly think it's something that could be changed. I would just,
I guess I just,
don't know if it's necessary. Yeah.
I just was looking for consistencies amongst all the bylaws and whatever laws we have, because, if it's in one place and it's not in another place, it could get confusing, and
Exactly.
what takes precedence over, it's arguable, but.
If I recall, it was supposed to be 35 feet for the max building height, right?
And someplace it was 32.
Right.
Yeah, and here it's 32.
So it should be 35? Okay, because we can make that change. I mean, that's certainly something that we could make without posting a new public
Yeah.
hearing. That's
I-
just
Because
consistency.
it's already, right.
Okay.
Thank you,
So,
Carol, for bringing that
Yeah.
up.
And
Because we just-
I just had one other comment, and I can't remember, but I think it was like item 6 or previous, where it talks about the 30% of the lot area and 20. Were we changing those percentages?
Here?
Yeah, here.
Oh. No, there was no vote taken to do that. However,
Okay, that's fine.
if you want to, have that discussion and, make that vote.
I'm good with it. I just I had some scribbles from the meeting. I guess there was some concern about the percentages. I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with the percentages.
Like, can I-
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern is on a small lot. They're going to end up building like one house. So it
Okay.
defeats the purpose.
Okay, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
I think,
I'd like to say something.
okay, Robert. To those of you who are not on the board that have joined us, we're just having discussion now. We're not in the public hearing yet. Okay? Robert?
I see the parking requirements and everything else. I'd like to see how this could be adapted to a mixed-use facility. And in that kind of situation, I mean, I like the option of a potential developer to be able to use a mixed-use facility. And then the parking requirement would have to have some kind of clarification on that. Because the concept would be shared parking between all the uses in the facility.
Yeah, it's at my home though, online, it's okay. I was trying to call you earlier when I was at the senior center. I was wondering if you were, I'm not even sure they have any seats available, but they have anything.
Can I just make a comment? I think that's not really the proposal tonight. So I'm not sure if I would
Okay,
conversation. I don't know.
it's Monday night at 5 o'clock. I don't even know if they would be.
Hey, just, Carol, can you please mute?
Later, bye.
Carol,
Yeah.
could you please mute?
Unfortunately, this is at the very end of the process of amending. I mean, there can be amendments made tonight, but, at this point, starting to look at those details might be for the next town meeting. Yeah, I'm just thinking clerically and administratively. I think we're going to have to work within what we have tonight. No.
Okay, well, let's see how we do in the public hearing and if the board has any further recommendations.
Okay.
What is, we have our place card, we would just have to decide on what it is we want to present.
Okay.
at the meeting before the 29th. So, okay.
Would you like the site plan review put up?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So for this one, changes are under section A, subsection 2, he added and scenic roadways after the neighborhood. And on subsection 3, protection of the public health and wellness were added. And subsection B, subsection A, this is the applicability section. The site's basically been in compliance with a previously issued site plan review special permit under this section for at least the immediately preceding. Was struck 12 and you changed it to 24. And then further down in subsection C, the planning board finds by the same vote would be required for using a special permit, and based on the actual history of the site after consulting with you added appropriate town departments, including but not limited to. So those words are added. Subsection D was stricken entirely. And then down here in procedure, subsection C, procedure number 1, the additional wording was added to address the requirements of the stormwater management bylaw. And it's 6:43 right now, so if you want, you have people signing on, you can go back to the agenda if you like, or if you have any.
Okay. So just to be clear, and I think everybody knows this, that all the changes that you see here tonight are because of the public hearing that we had, and all the comments that were made, we took into consideration and voted on those changes at the last meeting. And then our town council prepared the changes into the document.
That's true, Madam Chair, of the age-restricted development proposed bylaw amendments. This is the first public hearing for the site plan review special permit proposed amendments. Okay?
Okay, so we're not discussing age restricted tonight.
We're discussing both. If you read the public hearing, both discussion of 145-54-1 and 145-42. Those are two different bylaw amendments. We're just doing them at the same time.
I see. Okay.
So you do one at a time. You pick whatever you want to do first.
Well, we'll just go in the order that you put them up, and that was the site plan review. Right?
Oh, sorry, I have the wrong legal notice up there. Sorry. Yeah, so you have the legal notice, right, Lori?
I do.
Okay, so yeah, whenever you're
I
ready.
will be reciting that. So
Okay.
we are at 6:45 on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. Public hearing. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, 5, and 11, the Townsend Planning Board will hold a virtual public hearing on November 16th at 6:45 p.m. to review two proposed amendments to the Townsend zoning bylaw, Chapter 145 of the Town Code, Article 9, entitled Special Provisions, Section 54.1, entitled Age Restricted Development, and Section 42, entitled Site Plan Review Special Permit. Remote access is via Zoom. Parties wishing to speak in support of or opposition to this bylaw amendment may do so in writing prior to the hearing or at the hearing. Copies of the proposed amendment are available in Town Hall or upon request by emailing. Respectfully submitted, Laura Schifrin, Chairman. Okay, I'd like to introduce the board members, please. I'd like a roll call of board
Sure.
members here.
Carol Hoffs is present.
Robert Darian present.
And Laura Schifrin present. All of those who are here for the public hearing, I'd like you to announce yourselves, please.
Veronica Kell.
Okay, Veronica,
Todd Melanson.
Todd. Our town council is here.
I'm here, Madam Chair. Adam Costa. How are you?
Yes. Okay, how are you? Nice to see
Okay,
you.
thank you. Same here.
Okay, so is that everyone? We have TCAM on.
My colleague Ryan Clemens is on as well.
Okay.
Cindy King. Or-
And Cindy King
Yep, I see her there.
and Ryan Clemens. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Okay, so I read the legal notice ahead of time. I apologize. What you have before you is the proposal, basically, as was discussed at our last meeting, the original hearing for the age-restricted zoning. Yeah, right. Okay, and Beth, you have that up.
Yep.
And the highlighted in green are the changes to this. Being the 2 was changed to 1 and on the acreage. And wasn't there one other on this?
Mhm.
Yes. And then on number 8, and Adam, thank you for the verbiage. In green, you'll see provided, this is in reference to the waivers, provided that the planning board also finds that the reduction, alteration, or waiver would advance the purpose of this section and further the public interest. And that is all that was changed from our last hearing on this. There was discussion that we would change the height of the buildings to back to 35. This says 32, but back to 35 so that it's consistent with the current bylaw. Does anyone else have any comments on the age-restricted zoning?
Are you talking to the board, Lori, or are you talking to the people in attendance?
In attendance.
Well, I have comments.
Were you at the hearing on the 24th?
The first hearing? No, I was not. I was unable to attend that, but I did send in a letter.
Yes, and your letter was read.
Correct.
Okay. What comments do you have now?
I have several questions. For my first question, and this is something that came up in discussion at the Board of Selectmen meeting, is why are we making changes to this bylaw when it was just put into effect a little over a year ago?
I can give you my perspective, and that is that bylaws are living documents, and it doesn't matter how long it's been in effect. If there is a need or we find a need to tweak the bylaws that we have, we do that. There's no age restriction on the bylaws. Of when
I understand that, but I guess why is there a need to tweak this one when it was so recently voted in?
In looking at the housing production plan that was recommended, that we use consultants for, the and in looking, this is also a recommendation from the Housing Authority Board, who did the investigating of other towns, similar towns. Some had different, anyway, they were discussed from town to town. And we felt that the 2-acre minimum was too restrictive. And so that is what's being changed to 1.
Hey, TJ, can I call you back? I'm in a meeting.
And then.
Oh, shit, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that.
No, you wouldn't have known. All right.
Todd,
All right, bye.
I thought I was muted. I'm sorry.
okay.
My next question is, so can this, so it's been dropped to 1 acre, as long as there is 100 feet frontage, which pretty much, and public water. So if you're on the public water line, which is increasingly, you can do this on, can someone on their existing lot decide that they are going to put this into play, make 4 units in their existing home, for example. And since most of the lots that have 200-foot frontage, can they then subdivide and put another housing unit or so on the other half of their lot? Is that a possibility?
I imagine that there are many possibilities that could come before the planning board, or changes that could be made. Part of this is to help encourage development, to create more housing than what we have not been doing for many years. So
I thought it was I thought the purpose, this is market rate, correct? This is not workforce housing, or this is market rate 55 and over housing. Is that correct?
this is the age-restricted housing, yes.
Okay.
So I don't
Who
know
will
how that would-
monitor?
How would that come into play in an existing home? You stated
Couldn't
in,
you put 4 units in the building that you have? Would you be able to do that? And decide that you're going to take 100, you have 200 feet frontage. So you could, depending on the lot and how things are positioned, put 4 units, could you not, on 1 acre, cottage dwellings or 2-family dwellings. So maybe you do 2, and you say, I'm going to turn my house into a 2-family with 2 units.
and it's
And then I'm going to add a building with the frontage being the other 100 feet. I'm going to add a building or 2 more cottages or whatever, 4 cottages on the other acre, assuming I could put in septic for that.
correct. Assuming you could put in septic and assuming that you were building for 55 and over.
And how is 55 and over monitored in Townsend? How do you see that happening?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Just like any other law that's put into place, until you start working it, you don't know how it's going to be monitored.
Okay, did the planning board consider looking at zoning in town and making an overlay district for 55 and over housing? I had always imagined, and I was on the planning board when this started, that this was for a 55 and over development, market rate housing for people who would like to stay in town and perhaps downsize and move to one of these units. I think that there's potential here when you make the lot size smaller, when you basically say anything can be waived, not just the distances between units or property lines, but anything. Originally, the waiver was more on distances on things. This, I mean, even the parking can be waived if you put in the waiver change that's there. So if these sorts of changes are going to be made to the existing bylaw, I would prefer that the town take a step back and look at where in town you want this, because I think there is the potential to make this a town of apartments or condos or whatever on smaller lots, with no monitoring going on. Because, even now, I think it's fair to say that accessory apartments in town are not monitored. And so what does this do to the character of the town overall? And I certainly understand the need for housing and for age restricted. So those are my concerns. Even the open space part, that 30%, that was left in. That was something that I was concerned about when it was 2 acres. With 1 acre, I don't know, that can be waived because everything in the bylaw can be waived. So those are my comments. I'm not in support of these changes at this point. I think there needs to be a bigger look at what we want in town and where we want it and what it looks like. And do it in conjunction with the Housing Authority, the Affordable Housing Trust, all of the groups in town that have concerns about housing. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Anyone else?
I'd like to comment.
I would like to comment too. That's why I had my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, Todd. Okay. I'm going to recognize Todd at this time. I'm getting to see the hands now. I'm sorry I didn't hold that up.
That's all right. I guess my concern with dropping to 1 acre, I sent an email to Beth outlining my concerns. It has to do with up and coming contaminants. Right now, the one that we're most worried about is PFAS. I would suggest, I'll just read what I wrote basically. It's becoming more and more evident that concentrated septic systems can and are causing the spread of certain contaminants in the aquifer, with PFAS being the primary concern right now. I'd like to suggest excluding areas that contribute to the town's municipal water resources. These areas would be the Zone 2 wellhead protection areas located within the town and the defined areas of high to median aquifers within the town, especially anything upstream from these areas. Also, we should be looking at any stormwater impacts to the municipal water resources and possibly excluding any upstream implementation of these resources within this bylaw. Again, Zone 2 in the defined aquifers. By excluding these areas from the amendment, by that I mean not allowing these to be applied in these areas, I believe the town and the planning board would, to its best of ability, be protecting the drinking water resources of the community. If not, I believe these amendments will lead to the further spreading of contaminants of concern within our resources, creating both health and legal liability in the near future. You have to understand that PFAS is going to be added to the list of toxic contaminants that you will be held liable for. And I included a map that has the Zone 2s in it and the high and medium aquifers in it. I really, really and truly think that you should consider amending it to exclude these areas because we're finding more the state and the federal government are extending contaminants of concern that are in our everyday life, and they end up in second septic systems. If you look at what happened to Harbor Trace, the septic systems, the concentration of septic systems in Timberley Park led to the contamination of the Harbor Trace well. Right now, and the Witches Brook wells. Right now, Cross Street and Main Street are free of contamination. I think we should do whatever's in our best interest to protect those resources so we don't have to add further treatment. And that would be the end of it. If you got any questions for me, feel free.
Thank you, Todd. Those are good points that were not discussed at our last meeting. So I appreciate that. Let's see, Cindy King.
Trying to find my mute button. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any negative comments at all. I want to just strongly support more housing availability and the steps. I really like the steps that you're taking to increase the amount of housing. And I don't think that we're going to become an apartment town. We certainly don't have an apartment town now, and we're lacking in apartments, and we're lacking in affordable apartments, and we're lacking in places for people over 55 to reside in without having to move out of town as they age. I think Todd's comments, of course, are very important, and the Board of Health issues with septic, even without regards to PFAS. But those are all things that, regardless of whether we have this particular bylaw or whatever we're going to do, I have a hunch that we're going to be facing more and more problems if we don't do anything with the contaminations. And I think it's words that aren't part of this, but and it's hard for people to even comprehend. But I think the future of Townsend probably does include a wastewater treatment facility, which is completely not part of this at all, and I understand that. But which I'm not against it. But I think if we're gonna, we need to grow. We need to have more development. We need economic development on top of housing. And I think that shrinking some of our lots are pretty large, I think, right now, and reducing the ability for developers to come in and build some housing that's affordable, even down to tiny houses. Whatever we can do to make more availability, we're going to have to do something. Our population is shrinking. The projected population in Townsend is going to go down even more because we just don't have a place for people to live that they can afford to live in. So I just wanted to support whatever we can do to move this along, to increase housing rather than continually finding ways to say, oh, this is going to change the culture of Townsend. I don't believe it will. I think it's we need to have some change in moving into the future for the people that live here and will live here in the future. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Robert, I don't want to hold you up anymore.
I really appreciate the comments from Veronica King and Cindy, as well as Erwin. And so I see some of the problem being that we have a very simple scope or purpose here that probably has to be enhanced a little more. And the topics that have been presented are genuine concerns. And it's hard for everybody to see all the different kind of potential applicants there may be. And so some of these things are based on a certain assumption, and those assumptions include waivers from planning boards and zoning boards, requirements for septic engineering and design. So yes, there's a lot of great points here. And I think that what our board is trying to do is try to modify an existing bylaw that already is having some difficulties. So the question at hand is, should we stay with what we have and spend more time in developing a more comprehensive change to address a lot of these other topics? Or should we continue just to make the system that we have work a little better? And my perception of what's happening here is that there's recent bylaw that we're editing now and modifying now. The reason for that is because some topics that, like similar to these, have already surfaced, and so they're trying to be addressed here. So I'm of the opinion that this may be one of two things. Either we try to improve the current situation with the goal to come back again and redo all of what needs to be looked at, or keep the bylaw as the status quo with the intent of coming back and developing a better product. And there's a lot of questions here and a lot of scenarios that could happen. And so, again, a lot of this is relying on our town departments and agencies and the boards that we have. And right now, we have very responsible people in our departments, but that doesn't mean that will be consistent in all departments in the future. So to get something voted on by town meeting that everybody understands, I know it's a big topic because there's a lot of aspects to it. And particularly, concerns about preservation of the character of the town. And so I think on the surface, this sort of says to us, well, some of the existing houses here can't comply with the current bylaw, and therefore they have a very challenging time to try to add another unit to an existing house. In other words, making a single family house, a two-family house or whatever, or putting an in-law apartment or whatever.
Okay.
So I think that's what this was all about, the purpose of these changes. But what else, what other potential would they create and be viewed upon? So I'm going to leave that to the chair.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Adam, can I ask you a question
Of course.
regarding bylaws? Is there a restriction as to how often you can change your bylaws?
There is not.
Okay, or tweak them, kind of like go with the flow. If something happens, you address it. There's nothing wrong with that. Right?
There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's a policy determination for the town, how frequently and to what extent zoning bylaws, general bylaws should be proposed for amendment. I work in some communities that regularly, and that can be defined differently in different communities. Sometimes that's on an annual basis. Sometimes it's once every 4 or 5 years. But on some routine schedule, will do a comprehensive review of their zoning bylaws or comprehensive review of their general bylaws. I work in other communities where they don't do it on that sort of a schedule per se, but they will take up individual sections of a zoning or a general bylaw in a given year or for a particular annual or special town meeting, and will make modifications. But there's no legal restriction in Massachusetts law concerning how frequently you can make amendments to a zoning or a general bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Carol, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I gave Robert time.
I agree with Todd on the aquifer. I mean, just here in Timberley Park, when I go walking, there's so many people that just have so many water problems, issues with brown water, sediment in their water, refrigerators going on the brink and wash machines going on the brink because of sediment in our water. So I'm concerned, kind of about protecting the aquifer. And then on Veronica's comment about, well, if we have age restricted housing, where's the compliance? We don't really have anything in here that's like, there's no like language that's like oversight or compliance. How do we enforce that the units are going to be only sold to 55?
Okay, so here's what I know about 55 and over. There are laws that govern any 55 and over development that's created. So we don't have any in Townsend, but there are plenty around surrounding towns. Shirley has them. Gardner now is building them. I
You know,
think,
they're there because I actually, when I was 54, and they were building new 55 and over age restricted housing when I got divorced, right across the street from my house. And I
yeah,
had
Westford.
in Westford.
Yeah,
I looked into it because I was like 8 shy of being 55 and I could not buy, they would not let me buy a unit even because I wasn't 55 and but Westford actually has language in their bylaw that has a restriction, a covenant governing 55.
so Adam, are we missing that here? Like,
So this was a discussion, Madam Chair, this was a discussion that was had with the board when this bylaw was originally proposed for adoption. You might recall the board reviewed several versions and the drafting and redrafting occurred multiple occasions before this was brought forward for adoption by town meeting. And earlier versions were more complex in some respects and simpler in other respects. And one of the topics that we had addressed at the time was whether there was an interest in or a need for a provision that required the recording with the Registry of Deeds of some form of deed restriction or equivalent to ensure that these properties would remain age restricted. And we talked about some of the complications associated with that, what that meant in terms of age restricted 55 plus under different sorts of federal and state programs. Ultimately, where we ended up, and I say we, but it was really not my decision. I presented the options, but the decision of the planning board at that time was to default to making it an express requirement of the zoning bylaw. And of course, it would become a requirement of any special permit issued by the planning board, and then it would be enforceable as any other sort of zoning law would be enforceable by the zoning enforcement agent. That places an additional obligation on your building inspector. But I mean, that's the case very often with any sort of a zoning bylaw that includes unique or specific provisions that would require him or her, whoever is serving as zoning enforcement officer, to perform functions specific to the special permit that is issued under that particular provision of the bylaw. So that's where the planning board landed at the time. That's not to say the issue can't be revisited. I'll echo the comments Carol just made that in some other communities they have. I've seen more comprehensive age restricted bylaws than what you've got here. I've seen 10, 12 page age restricted development bylaws, and I've seen simpler age restricted development bylaws. So yours is somewhere in the middle. But you could certainly revisit that if it was an issue of concern to the public or of concern to the board, and you could incorporate a provision that required the recording of some form of restriction.
well, for us to add to this bylaw that just a simple sentence that you just said, that the age restriction must be recorded. Wouldn't that do the trick without putting 12 pages in, or?
Right. So I'm not suggesting
more
that, Chair,
understandable?
right. I'm not suggesting that change alone would convert what you have here into something far more complicated. I'm simply saying that the direction in which the conversation went, what was it, a year and a half ago when we were discussing the adoption of the bylaw, was to, you know, the meaning of age restricted 55 plus, and how we would structure the language of those restrictions, and whether we wanted to be specific enough in the text of the bylaw to clarify what that meant in terms of that one individual age 55 and older, what occurs in circumstances where it's one individual, maybe another individual who doesn't qualify, and then the individual who is over the age of 55 passes away, what does that mean in terms of the unit at that point, compliance with the restriction? We talked about the different types of programs that exist for this sort of housing from a financing or subsidy perspective. So there are some complications that arise when you begin to talk about, okay, well, what form is that restriction going to take? Because it's easy enough to include a sentence or two in the bylaw that says there shall be a restriction recorded, but you're going to want some oversight. You're going to want the form of restriction to be submitted to the board as part of the permitting process. You're going to want that to be reviewed by town council to ensure that it achieves your objective. And so that's why it can be a bit more complicated than a sentence or two.
Okay, I'm not sure where to take this because a lot of the statements that were made are what ifs. We haven't even started a process or development or anything, and it's already what ifs. So that prohibits anything from being done. That is staying, I don't look the same as I did 35 years ago, but Townsend does. And so taking another step back, we continually take step backs because it's like you can't and do not always think of everything. It's what you experience and how you address what's happening. And, I'll just briefly say, I just attended some meetings for public policy at NAR via Zoom. I was able to do that. But it is all about overlay districts. It's all about increased housing. It's all about changing zoning. It's all about allowing more development, something that Townsend has been very good at not doing for 46 years that I know of. So, having said that, we're doing the best we can here. And I do have a concern. I didn't see the email of Todd's, but I do have a concern. And I was just wondering if it would be easy enough to put the exclusions of the aquifer references that he made into this bylaw. I think they should be excluded. We don't have public water here, really. We have wells. And I continue to say everything is based on somebody being able to get a septic permit. Otherwise, you can't do anything, no matter how many acres you have or don't have. Are you thinking about this, Adam?
I wasn't sure if the question was directed to me. So,
Oh, yeah, it was.
so Madam Chair, the section that addresses applicability of the bylaw, section B1, effectively provides for the possibility of the issuance of a special permit in any of the 6 zoning districts that are referenced there. If you're going to exclude certain properties, we need to define with some specificity what those are. So I've also not seen the email that Todd referenced during his remarks. I understood the concern, I think, generally that he raised, but there needs to be some sufficient reference. Maybe it's not necessarily on a zoning map, but on some map, some plan of reference that exists today as to where these particular special permits would be prohibited effectively. Property within these 6 districts that would otherwise be eligible for a special permit under section B1 that won't be because they're on sensitive sites, so to speak. We need a way to define that, and we need to define it with sufficient specificity that it passes muster with the Attorney General. The Attorney General is not going to allow for sort of roving authority that could change, day to day, week to week, month to month after the bylaw is adopted concerning where you can issue these special permits and where you can't. That's why the way that this is typically done is either by identifying specific underlying zoning districts, which is the approach that you took a year and a half ago by identifying these 6 districts, or as Ms. Kell had commented on a bit earlier, by creating an overlay district. And the overlay district gives you the ability to do what you can't do with the underlying districts, which is to sort of fashion the boundaries of the districts as you see fit. And you can consider everything from the characteristics, the development characteristics of the locations that are within the overlay, to whether there are sensitive sites that should be excluded from the overlay. All those considerations can come into play, and you're not restricted by the existing boundaries of your underlying zoning.
Thank you, Adam. I think that is, I think that would be important and probably accomplish a couple of things at the same time. So do you think that we would be best to withdraw this for this meeting?
Well, Madam Chair, I guess the question I've got for you and for your fellow board members is, how close do you think we are? I mean, so restricting this bylaw, adjusting this bylaw, amending what is currently on the screen to eliminate some areas from eligibility for a special permit, to potentially make a further amendment that would specify the recording of some form of restriction in the registry of deeds for these age-restricted developments. Those are certainly the sorts of changes that I think would be within the scope of the public hearing and the process that's already underway. So it's less of a legal question. Do I think you can do it legally? Sure, you can make these changes now if you're prepared to make them on the fly and talk through that language here tonight. But practically speaking, number one, I don't know whether you feel comfortable attempting to do that right here and now. I don't feel comfortable recommending language without getting a better understanding of what it is that Mr. Melanson's proposing. And then number two, do you feel that those couple of changes are going to be sufficient enough to gain the support you need at town meeting? Because in my experience, and this is just advice based on experience, again, not strict black and white legal advice, it sort of puts you at a disadvantage if you take a bylaw that's not quite ready for prime time to town meeting and get it rejected at town meeting, only to then try and bring it back again 6 months or a year later, because people remember that it was just there and they say, didn't we just strike this down a year ago? Why are you bringing it back? We already said no once. They don't necessarily know that you've continued work on it and that it's a different product. So my experience with bylaw changes, zoning or general, is that if it's not ready for prime time, if as a result of the public hearing process, you're making so significant of changes to it that it's really a different document, my recommendation in those instances are postpone action, continue work on it in the ensuing 6 months, and bring it back at the next annual or special. And one other comment I'll make while I'm talking is I did pull up what I had reviewed and revised back in February of 2021. So I don't feel too bad because it was about 18 months ago, which is why I didn't remember it quite like it was yesterday. But there was some language that I had proposed adding as a result of the ongoing discussions. I think I attended 2 or 3 sessions of the public hearing at that time on this original bylaw. And I had included in one of my later drafts an additional criterion under section C, basic requirements, that said, quote, all dwelling units in an age-restricted development with an occupancy restricted to at least one person 55 years of age or older shall be so restricted by deed rider, restrictive covenant, or equivalent document recorded with the Middlesex South District Registry of Deeds or with the Land Registration Office. The age restriction shall run with the land in perpetuity and shall be enforceable by any or all of the owners of the dwelling units in the development and or by the town of Townsend. So we did have some language that accomplished that for reasons I can't recall, quite frankly, and it might have occurred after my involvement. The planning board ultimately chose to eliminate that from the version that made its way to town meeting.
And I don't remember that either as to why that wasn't there, because that's language that I've seen in others. I've had some people look into going into a 55 and over, and so, okay. Any further discussion?
I,
Oh, no. Robert, I was just about to say because I don't, I mean, I can entertain a motion from the board if you want to postpone the presentation of the age restricted bylaw that we had.
I will make a motion that we do not go forward with this alteration. And I believe it's not comprehensive enough, and we probably have a better opportunity to do more in an overlay district. I do not feel that we'll get the support at a town meeting. I think it's weak in several areas, and it doesn't address all the needs of the community. And so I'm make a motion that we refrain from advancing forward with this and remove it from any agenda for the town meeting.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye. And
Aye.
state your name. Roll call vote, please.
Carol Hoff says yes.
Robert Darian, here.
Laura Schifrin's going to abstain. Thank you very much.
And Madam Chair, what was the vote there? Was that two in favor and one abstention?
Does that fly?
That's fine. I didn't hear the second vote. I thought I heard a here and not a yes. I wanted to be certain it was a yes.
Yeah, Robert, was that a yes?
To my motion? My motion? Yes.
He was the maker of the motion. Carol seconded. They both voted yes. Okay, so on to the next part, which is the site plan review. And Beth, if you could put that up. So what you see in red on this, again, comes from the October, no, this doesn't. This is what we did. This is our first hearing on the site plan review, right? Beth?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I muted? Oh,
Would you,
Yes.
would you take that over, Beth?
oh, well, this was done in a public meeting. The planning board has been going through the entire code, little by little in the regulations for the planning board. And this was done by the board during one of their meetings. And I'm sorry, I can't, okay. So the proposed amendments that are being suggested are on the site plan review special permit, subsection A under purpose. Subsection 2 is the addition of 3 words. So coordination and improvement of systems of vehicular and pedestrian access, drainage, water supply, sewage disposal, lighting, landscaping, wetlands, watercourses, buildings, and other features that support the neighborhood, and including the words and scenic roadways. That was the first change proposed. Then next in subsection A, subsection 3, again, under purpose, protection of the public health and wellness. So the words and wellness have been added. Further down in subsection B, applicability, and these are situations where the planning board is going to be, or actually the zoning enforcement officer is going to be considering projects that are applicable for site plan review. In subsection C, it says the planning board finds by the same vote that would be required for issuing a special permit, and based on the actual history of the site, and after consulting with, they added appropriate town departments, including but not limited to the police department and the Board of Selectmen. Previously, there was simply those two boards listed. So that's language included to expand on the resources of town departments and governments. Subsection D is stricken altogether because the ground-mounted solar energy district is not part of the zoning bylaw right now. That was the bylaw was revised. And actually, I was going to ask town council if you could do a quick look at the code on this one, just to verify that. I don't know if that was done. I know you'll do it later when you do the whole review, but this one we struck the whole thing. So just want to make sure that that was okay. And then further down, subsection C under procedure.
Beth, if I may, on that stormwater extraction there, that paragraph is because there's now a stormwater bylaw.
No,
And
this was the ground-mounted solar energy
Oh,
district.
the ground mounted one.
Yeah, and the bylaw was revised and a new bylaw was presented. And I'm not sure if that was correctly notated in the code. So that's something that will have to be looked at. So under procedure, subsection 1, this was added to correct verbiage for the stormwater management permit and application in reference to the stormwater management bylaw. And subsection 2 of that section was stricken completely. And that was all that we have. Not really, I don't think there's anything else that I saw.
Any other comments from the board, please?
I think the recommended changes are the positive ones, and I support them.
Carol?
Yes, I also support the changes.
And I also support the changes. Any comments from the public? Am I missing any hands? Let's see. I don't see any comments from the public. Were there any written comments, Beth?
No,
Okay.
no comments were returned from the mandatory referrals or the referrals. So
Okay. I'll ask the board to entertain a motion to move the site plan review bylaw forward to the special town meeting.
I'd so make a motion to move it forward.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, if no further discussion, I'll call for a roll call vote.
Carol Hofstas, yes.
Robert Therian, yes.
Laura Schifrin, yes. And I see nothing else to come before us, unless I'm forgetting something. Adam or Beth?
Not for me.
no, I would just close the public hearing, and then if the board would want to do your reasons and your report, this is probably a good time to do it. So, but yeah, close the public hearing if you're done.
I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing, please.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second.
That would be 7:35 p.m. At 7:35 p.m. And Barbara second. Roll call vote, please.
Carol Hofstas, yes.
Robert Therian,
Is that a yes?
yes.
Laura Schifrin, yes. Okay, thank you everyone for attending the public hearing. And now, Beth, how would you like us to discuss this? Adam, what else do you need? Do you need anything else from us?
So, Madam Chair, I don't need anything else from you, but you have an obligation under the statute following a public hearing, and you don't have to do so for the age-restricted development bylaw because you voted not to advance it. But with respect to the site plan review special permit bylaw, which you are advancing, you're required to make a report with your recommendation to town meeting. Very often the report and the case law supports this is really nothing more than that you recommend it, particularly when you're the sponsor of the article, you're going to be presenting it. But you could discuss if you want to say something more in your official report to town meeting, and you can also discuss, what you intend to do in terms of your presentation to town meeting, whether one of you is going to present this in coordination with the selectman and the town administrator. Because if you're the proponent of the article, then generally the moderator will defer to you to present to the voters what it is that you're proposing.
Okay. So what's the pleasure of the board? I mean, it's not real complicated.
So what do we have? So I guess, what do we have to do? A report?
Yeah, but I don't think it's, I mean, the only question they came up was to make sure if the D there with the ground mounted solar, if that's appropriate for us to do. So I guess we'll get the answer to that question. But other than that, we've just added
Clarification.
words, and we changed, pretty sure we changed the 12 to 24 because we just didn't feel that was enough time.
I apologize, I didn't say that, but yes, you're right. In subsection A, under applicability, that was extended to 24 months.
Yeah, I think that was just, we had a discussion on all of these.
Yeah, it was up to
Yeah.
about one time. So
Yeah, I
now-
believe the 24 months we changed because we didn't feel the 12 months was enough.
Right. So, and we wanted more input and see. So we just added that we could ask for referrals from other appropriate departments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, can I ask town council a question through you?
Sure.
Is it possible, Adam, to research that right now, or is that something you have to come back for? That item D?
So Beth, I guess I'm not understanding exactly what your question is. So you've eliminated item D.
Yes.
We never had a discussion about the rationale for that. I don't think so. Why is D being eliminated? Why is that a change that's proposed?
Because I believe that the solar energy district does not exist anymore with the new bylaw. So I was wondering if you could do a quick check on that, just to verify that indeed, I mean, this was added in 2011, so that's what made me nervous. But I don't believe the ground-mounted solar energy district exists. That's my concern.
So that's my recollection, that the district was replaced with a self-contained section of the zoning bylaw that addresses large-scale ground-mounted solar installations.
Correct.
So solar installations are still addressed by the bylaw. You still have a section that addresses their siting, but it's not. I don't believe that there is an existing, and I will check it now, that there is an existing district.
Correct. Okay. I just want to strike something that shouldn't be. I mean, it does say in there, the project, however, shall be subject to a non-discretionary site plan review. Well, that's true. So are we allowed to strike it? I mean,
So
or is
I suspect, and I don't know. So this provision predates me, and even the change in, and I've got the bylaw open now. It looks like the date of adoption of the new provisions was 2017. So even that predates my representation of the town. So I don't have any firsthand knowledge, but my guess, just reading the sentences that are being stricken, is that the objective here, so this subsection D that you're striking, these are instances where if you scroll up a tiny bit on the page, there you go, number 1. So it says, however, no special permit is required for a change of use where the following conditions apply. So these subsections A, B, C, and D, D being stricken, these are instances where no special permit is required. And what this is saying is that if the site is located within this ground-mounted solar energy district, and the proposed use was going to be for a ground-mounted solar energy facility, that there would be no special permit required. However, the board could perform what's called a non-discretionary site plan review. So the reason that I suspect, and I think I can say it with almost certainty, even though I wasn't involved, that the source of this language is the concern that under Chapter 40A, Section 3, which is a provision of the State Zoning Act, there is an exemption for solar energy facilities. And so the concern in 2011, when this was adopted, was likely that you don't have the authority to exercise the same degree of discretion that you typically would for a special permit when that special permit is for a solar energy system, because solar energy systems are entitled to that exemption under state law. So I think that's probably the source of this language. Now, the district no longer exists. It doesn't appear now that I have the bylaw open, but you do have provisions that deal with large-scale ground-mounted solar installations. And there's as of right siting of those installations in certain locations, and there is a special permit that's required in certain other locations. But the new bylaw is fairly comprehensive and self-contained. So there is a section that addresses site plan review specifically, and talks about site plan review by the site plan review authority, which would be the planning board, prior to construction, installation, or modification, and then has a whole series of requirements. So I think that, at first glance here, the new section 145-86 covers you. So you could likely delete this language and still be still be protected by the language of the relatively new bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense to me. What's the date of the meeting again?
Town meeting?
Yeah.
Is on the 13th.
Of
At
December?
7 o'clock, yep, 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 13th. And it's in person and Town Hall, Memorial Hall. Your next meeting is December 12th, the night before. I would presume you'd want to have your report done and your reasons done.
I don't think this report is going to be very much, unless you see something I don't see.
No, I mean, these are not substantive changes, really. They're more administrative and clerical changes, so I don't see.
I should be there, and I'm happy to present. Do I have to give a written report, or just my motions written out?
A written report, I can draft that for the board, and that would be based, I would just have the vote that you took tonight, and basically if you wanted to put reasons, for your amendment proposal, then I would list those in planning board report in a formal memo to town meeting. And that's all you have to read. And it has to be handed to the town clerk, I believe, or pretty sure it does. Yeah, the report of planning board, it has to be provided on town meeting floor during the meeting. So I could provide that with the information that you've provided tonight. My only question would be, did you want to add any reasons for, you want a formal reason for the proposed amendments, changes to the site plan review? If anybody wants to take a crack at it.
Well, I thought that this was part of our review of all of our bylaws or policies, or whatever, of the planning board.
Okay.
So we were taking this section by section. Granted, we haven't gotten too much further than this section, but we have gotten through this section. And, if we would be doing more if we didn't have as many public hearings or other things going on. So that was the intent. the beginning of the year, if I'm correct.
Yep.
So I would tell them that this is part of our ongoing process,
Okay,
that the board is looking at the policies
excellent.
for our bylaws.
Okay.
Do you think that's sufficient, Adam?
I do. I mean, just to offer a bit of additional clarity here. So the statute requires for any zoning bylaw or zoning bylaw amendment presented to town meeting that there be a planning board public hearing and that the planning board make a report to town meeting. And the idea is that it's not always the planning board that is the proponent of the article. There could be citizens petitions that propose changes to zoning. The select board could propose changes to zoning. Any resident could come forward and the select board could accept, even without a formal citizens petition, a proposed change to zoning. And so in those instances, the planning board is going to have a comprehensive discussion about whether they support or not the proposal that's made by the citizens petitioners or by the select board or by the zoning board or whomever it might be, whatever entity it might be bringing forward the change. In this instance, it's the planning board that is the proponent. So it's sort of assumed, even though you still have to go through the motions of making the report, that you're going to support your own article. You are the proponent. If you didn't support your own article, well, then you wouldn't be advancing it at town meeting. Now, the support may not be unanimous, and so you would want to report that. In this case, it is unanimous. But the report, especially in circumstances like these, can be very simple. It can simply be after a public hearing conducted on November 16th, the board voted to report favorably and recommend approval of the changes to the site plan review special permit bylaw to make it more practical and to be consistent with other portions of the bylaw. It could really be as simple as a couple of sentences like that. You then need to prepare, and again, this second piece doesn't need to be part of the report or in writing, but you need to prepare your remarks for town meeting. I would not say it would be sufficient in this context to simply get up and read that report, because in addition to being the reporter, you're also the proponent. And so you've got to get up and actually present the article and explain the article in greater detail to the residents who attend town meetings so they understand, what it is that's being changed and why it's being changed.
Okay, so as we reviewed in the public hearing this evening, would that be the information that would be sufficient?
Yes.
Okay, because if they had attended the public hearing, they would know that. There isn't anything more to say about other than what we said tonight.
Correct, but as you can see from the attendance tonight, you're going to have hopefully a whole lot more people at town meeting. So
Understood.
yeah, so you're right. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of a repeat exercise, but it's not always. I mean, there are many instances where there's a controversial zoning article, and you'll go 3 2-hour sessions of a public hearing before the planning board. That's 6 hours in total. You're not going to have 6 hours on town meeting floor. So in this case, these are relatively minor amendments. So I don't think you have to have a lengthy presentation for town meeting. I think you read the 2-sentence report and then you give a 60-second, 2-minute presentation on why you're tweaking these few provisions. And that's really it. It's not, nobody even made comments, those in attendance tonight, nobody even made comments on this particular warrant article. So I don't expect it's going to be terribly controversial.
Okay. And I would offer to either Carol or Robert, if you wanted to make the presentation at town meeting. I'm open to that.
I don't mind. No,
Okay. Carol, why don't you just send everybody that report, and we'll all approve it, and then Robert can handle that at town meeting.
when is town meeting?
That's December 12th?
December
13th.
Oh, 13th.
I'm thinking your next meeting, sorry. December 13th, Tuesday night, in person at Memorial Hall, Great Hall.
Okay.
Did you say Carol was preparing the report or me?
I hope you are, Beth.
Okay. No problem.
And so Robert will be the presenter. Is there any other business to come before us this evening? No. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:52 p.m. Is there a-
Well, where's my mute?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'll second that motion.
Okay. All those in favor, roll call vote, please.
Carol Hoff says yes.
Robert Darian, yes.
Laura Schifrin, yes. Adam, thank you very much. And thank you to Ryan for joining us this evening and everyone else. We appreciate your attendance.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night, thanks.